This video is brought to you by PickDrop. Despite not being the coolest kid in the classroom with cameras around that are more hyped, like the Fujis or even the Ricoh GRs lately, the Sony a7C II never suffered from supply chain issues or weird marketing strategies to artificially inflate the buzz around it. Because of that, it has constantly been ranked in the top 10 selling cameras at a quite high rank if we narrow down the ranking to full-frame cameras. So I'm not here to break the news whether it is a great camera or not. I think the figures already prove that, but I wanted to make this video now that I have owned and heavily used my Sony a7T for about 18 months. Hopefully I can give you some guidance if you're looking to get one yourself, and I also have a thorough experience with the Sony a7 IV, so I will also compare both cameras and give my recommendation based on the intended use case. I was very optimistic about the a7C II in a video I made about a year ago. Now my opinion changed a bit, it matured I would say, and the a7C II versus a7 IV battle is not as obvious in my mind as it was then. And by the way, I'm no Sony ambassador, I never had contact with them and I paid for all the Sony cameras that I ever owned. I also had the chance to use cameras from other brands like Ricoh, Fuji or even Hasselblad, so I know a little bit what is possible to do with camera nowadays in terms of hardware and software, so I have a bit of a point of comparison. What I can observe is that I have always gone back to my Sony cameras for their performance, reliability and hybrid capabilities that are still the best on the market for someone like me who does video alongside photography. But before getting into the meat of this video, regardless of which camera they were taken with, you will probably need to send some of your photos to clients, collaborators or friends, and that's when today's video sponsor come in, PickDrop. PickDrop is an online platform designed for photographers by photographers where you can share, present and deliver photos in a clean and professional way. You can create beautiful galleries, control exactly who can see or download your images, and even get feedback directly on the pictures, so no messy email chains. I've been using it recently and it's super intuitive. If you are used to a photo editor and library like Lightroom, you will get a hang on PickDrop in seconds. I recently worked on a documentary capturing B-roll clips of Hiroshima, so yes, you can also share videos and it was very simple. The gallery is now filled with my selects that can be reviewed, commented on, flagged and of course downloaded by my peer in the United States. And I love that you can collaborate on the culling aspect of the process, making the communication and the revision much faster. Whether you're working with clients, collaborators or just sharing photos with friends, PickDrop makes the process fast, organized and stress-free. I leave a link in the description so you can try it out for 2 months for free. So thanks a lot to PickDrop for your support, and now let's get back to the video. So I'll try to keep a little bit of a structure to this video, talking about my likes, dislikes, ideal use case and my purchase recommendation, also going through little other details along the way. But first, I was not even sure to mention that because of how obvious it is, but let's talk about image quality. It is absolutely fine to me. You have a very good full-frame 33 megapixel sensor that produces files that are very nice to work with. I like the balance you get with 33 megapixel files. It's full of data, allowing a decent amount of cropping, even more if you use like resolution enhancement features, but at the same time it is not so much data so your computer can edit them smoothly. The dynamic range is also obviously very good. Coming from a Sony camera, it's not a surprise. You have clean shadows and plenty of latitude and flexibility with the shadows and highlight areas. Color rendering is very neutral in my opinion. You don't get the special brand color science like the Fuji or Nikon for good JPEGs out of the box, but when it comes to having a standard, a neutral baseline of colors and data to work with when shooting RAW, it is very good in my opinion. On the autofocus, other brands are getting back in the game, but still Sony stays above the rest. It's an absolute delight to shoot with both in photo and video mode. The autofocus abilities are improved over the a7 IV with a new chip and more ways to detect your subject and what you actually want to focus on. So sometimes you see a box around a whole person in the frame or even vehicles, things that you don't get with the a7 IV, but at this point I feel like it's almost more of a way to reassure the user than actual improved autofocus abilities. On the a7 IV you would have series of small squares on the subject, not a whole box around it, but the accuracy and the performance is almost on par, I guess. And I think that the overall price to performance ratio on the Sony a7C II is off the chart. It's full frame, you can change lenses, and with all the native and non-native lenses on the market, you can get a very good, compact, full frame setup that costs about the same as a Fuji X-T5 or a Fuji X100VI that are APS-C cameras, and actually a fixed lens in the case of the X100VI. The Nikon ZF, which is full frame and maybe a bit more comparable to the a7C II, is also about the same price, and I believe that the a7C II is better in terms of compactness and overall performance, but yeah, it looks a bit less cool, I admit. So let's talk about my likes. And first of all, what made me get an A7C II alongside the A7 IV is its compactness and how light it is. Now that I have owned it for a long time and I can confirm I still love the form factor, you still get a decent grip on it, grip that fits the same style of battery that lasts very long, so we are not losing anything by going for a smaller camera body. But I would say that to really benefit from the compact form factor of the A7C II, I think you should also adapt your lens choice, but we'll come back to it soon enough. I'll give you a more practical example and also how this rangefinder style body makes a difference compared to the A7 IV. I love sling bags, like many of you I guess, and when I slide my A7C II into a medium-sized sling bag, the fact that it doesn't have the viewfinder bump in the middle of the top part of the body like a regular SLR camera, it fits perfectly. It leaves a bit more space on the front accessory pocket of the bag to fit my keys, AirPods case or ND filter or whatever I might be carrying. The viewfinder itself also, I like it. I am not a fan of the quality and the color accuracy of it. I think it is below standards, but at the same time I don't care too much because the viewfinder for me is here just to get a better sense of my composition or my exposure in bright conditions, but I don't look through it just for the sake of looking through it. But I like this rangefinder style placement over the standard SLR way. My big nose is not constantly spreading some skin oil all over the LCD screen, and also I can look through the viewfinder and keep my left eye open to stay aware of what or who is coming to potentially get a better shot and catch a decisive moment. And with this smaller and more friendly looking form factor, it is also more inconspicuous. While paired to a good quality compact lens, you get quite a powerful setup, small and still full of pro level features. The A7C II is also a true hybrid camera with a dedicated mode switch dial and separate sets of settings that you can decide to carry over or keep separate when moving from a still to a video mode and vice versa. You also get 3 custom mode slots that I literally always use. You can set one for general bright conditions, one with a lower minimum shutter speed for when there is no movement or if you want to limit the bump in ISO, and maybe a last one suited for low light shooting, for example. And for video, you could have one for daylight outdoor shooting with daylight white balance, another one for interior with auto white balance, and maybe a last one where you set the ISO to the second ISO base of 3200. When taking photos, switching to movie and back to still mode is so fast and seamless once you set up your cameras with the custom settings. It's perfect for when I'm out on my photo walks and mixing photo and video. I remember it was really not the same on my Fuji X-E4, even if we exclude the fact that it didn't have the mode switch because more recent cameras from Fuji have it, I believe. There was still some frustrating things, like when I locked the exposure to grab a clip, I had to press the button again to unlock the exposure before moving back to the photo mode. And there was just a lot of these little obstacles that made the hybrid shooting experience more choppy than with my Sony cameras. There's also a lot of discussion lately around why you should get a fun camera and a workhorse camera if you are doing photography for a living. Fun cameras are often associated with a bit more quirky design, some little flaws, and maybe also nicer design. But for me, the A7C II is really that fun camera because it is small and it works seamlessly. Basically, I have more fun doing photography with a bit of video when I am not constantly reminded by some design flaws and half-working features. So for me, as a photographer who shoots raw and love the editing and cutting process, a camera like the Sony A7C II is really a fun yet work-capable camera. And I also have one more recent like I have discovered, and it is the ability to use Zebra. I love the feature as it is because it lets me nail exposure even in more difficult scenarios, making sure that I bring back the file that has the most potential and the most data to work with in post. Actually, it is also in more straightforward bright conditions that the Zebra helps me a lot not to underexpose and get a photo out of the box that is really close to the final result I want. But I started to like this feature even more when I learned that it is not available on cameras from other brands. They all have some sort of Zebra features, yes, but it is exclusively available in movie mode. You cannot use it when shooting stills, which is absolutely ridiculous, I think. On Sony, you can use the Zebra both on movie and still mode, and you can customize to whatever level you want. It's good that I am still finding little things that makes me appreciate my A7C more, even 18 months after getting it. Moving on to the dislikes and other less positive experience I had with the A7C II, and first, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the absence of joystick. Like I said in the video I made a year ago, there are plenty of workarounds to move your AF point, I think. I use a mix of touchscreen, this front wheel to move my AF box left and right, and also the AF on button that I set to tracking focus, and all sorts of things that when I'm using the A7C II, I don't really miss the joystick too much. I don't even think about it actually. But every time I pick up my A7 IV and use it for a photo walk or a photo gig, I really appreciate the joystick. So I think it doesn't look impossible to fit on the A7C body, so maybe in the next version of the A7C line we will see it, or maybe Sony will just intentionally leave it only on larger camera bodies to have more selling points for them. I don't really know. I put the form factor in my likes earlier, but still, I wanted to say that yes, it is small and compact, but it is also quite thick. It's good for the grip part, like I said, to have good ergonomics and a long-lasting battery, but elsewhere on the body it's very thick for no reason. I mean, yes, there must be a reason. I guess it is to fit all the internals and the IBIS, but because of that, it is not as small and sticking to your body like a smaller and thinner camera body would do. Here I am thinking of the X100 and the XE line at Fuji. The XE4 I used to have was very slim and just staying closer to my body when hooked to my neck strap. And I think this compact yet thick design will make a similar lens feel more front heavy and just heavier than the same setup on the A7 IV. On the A7 IV you have a slightly bigger grip and more weight at the bottom of the body, which balance better with heavier lenses. That's why I will always recommend getting an A7C II if you plan on using it mostly with compact lenses. Now I also have to tell you that during my 18 months with the A7C II I had to send it once for repair. I talked earlier about the custom modes that I love, maybe a bit too much because I move my mode dial just so many times every time I'm out shooting. Basically I have my most general custom mode on slot 1, I walk around, see a potential shot, adjust my settings, compose and shoot it, and once I move away from that shot I have this habit, it's almost like muscle memory at this point, but I switch my custom mode to slot 2 and back to slot 1 as a way to reset my settings to these general use case settings. That way I always have my camera ready to react and shoot, and also it is very close to the final settings I will use for the next composition that I will take more deliberately. But this puts some strain on the mode dial, I guess, and in the first video I made with the Sony A7C II, I said this. The A7C II is a bit more plasticky and feels ever so slightly cheaper than the A7 IV, but I like it. The materials still feel very nice and seem to be very durable. The buttons are a bit more clicky. I switch between stills and video mode a lot, and it's just easier to accurately switch between the modes without looking at the camera. Now maybe I realize that this more cheap feeling also equals less durability, because at some point my mode dial had an issue and it was switching mode by itself. Or maybe I just got unlucky with my copy, this I will never know. That said, they fixed it quite quickly. About 2 weeks passed between the day I gave my camera for repair until the day I picked it up in perfect working conditions. And my last point, we are now at the end of 2025 and we have extremely capable and very small size vlogging setup like the DJI Osmo Pocket and other action cams that keep looking better like every year. I think it is time to admit that full frame mirrorless cameras are no longer like vlogging cameras and that we can shift priorities on the LCD screen. These flippy screens are not good when it comes to using cameras when you are behind it taking photos or videos. I would have much preferred the A7C II to have a simple tilty screen over the flippy screen. I mean, I knew it and it didn't come as a surprise, but now that they are even able to make these tilty and flippy screens, so we'll have all the positions possible, probably it will be available in the next generation of the A7C. But if the body is too small for such screen or for whatever reason they cannot fit it in, I would love them to go back to a tilty screen for the next version. But I also have to admit that I recently found a new way to use this flippy screen, and it's when taking photos of my daughter or her cousins. If I flip the screen towards them, they are much more likely to look at the camera, smile or even laugh. You just have to shoot instinctively without feedback, but it's working well, so if you have a camera with a flippy screen and kids around you, maybe you should try it. So I think you got the point by now, but for me, the ideal use case with an A7C II is everything that involves like smaller, compact lenses. It doesn't mean that you cannot do professional work with it, but if you get an A7C II to attach a grip on it and use it with a bulky zoom lens, why not just getting an A7 IV, or if you have the budget, an A7R5 or even higher. I have the luxury to own both and justify keeping both, but I tried once to get a very nice grip for the A7C II and paired it to bigger lenses, and I ended up just thinking, why not just simply using my A7 IV in that case? The Sigma 28-70 I have is at the limit, I would say. I sometimes still use that lens on the A7C II, so I guess also the Sony G24-50 can work, but even with such light standard zoom lens, the grip and the ergonomics will be better on the A7 IV. So if you know that your main lens will be a zoom lens like that, or even bigger like the G Master or a telephoto zoom lens, I don't really see the point in getting an A7C II over an A7 IV. I never had an SD card failing on me so far in my career, but again here the A7C II has only one slot, so maybe it's not the ideal camera for critical photography work. I'm not saying that you cannot do professional work with it, you absolutely can, of course. The image quality is more than you need and the features will make the experience good enough, but you would just have more like peace of mind with a double SD card slot camera like the A7 IV, and also with better ergonomics you will have more like brain power to allocate to composition, spotting nice moments and directing your talents depending on the job you do. Quickly going over like JPEG and RAW files, and the A7C II and I would say all other Sony cameras are not the one you want if you plan to shoot JPEG only. That said, I believe that if you nail your exposure, do minor tweaks to the white balance like pushing a bit on the green and warmer side, you can get decent results. You just don't have much more settings to get like nicer colors and add effect like grain in camera. But with that mindset of trying to nail your exposure in camera without relying too much on editing, it will require only minor editing to get very good results from your RAW files. People saying that Sony needs too much editing must be doing something wrong in camera, I suppose, because when you expose to the right and you have a good base preset, you can get fantastic results in just a few seconds per photo. And on top of that, I would say that shooting RAW forces you to go through the uploading and culling process in a software like Lightroom, which will force you to archive your photos. Being able to find your photos years after taking them, it is something that will become more and more important as you progress in your photography career, and not just playing with JPEG that you send over to your phone to upload on Instagram is a good way to force a little bit of discipline in your archiving process. So now let's compare a little bit more the A7C II to the A7 IV. First on the performance side of things. In my use case, so street and travel photography, both cameras are very similar. On the A7C II, the shutter speed with the mechanical shutter goes up to 4,000ths of a second, over like 8,000ths of a second on the A7 IV, but I never shoot like wide open at f1.8 in broad daylight, so this is a non-issue for me. The A7C II has also supposedly better autofocus and slightly better IBIS than the A7 IV, but again, it is so marginal that never I felt like, wow, the A7C II is so much better than the A7 IV. For me, they are really on par. Ergonomics, of course, are better on the A7 IV with more buttons and therefore more customization possible. The grip also is more comfortable, and like I said, you really feel it when you start to use zoom lenses or premium prime lenses that are heavier and faster. Finally, my recommendations. So if you're a hobbyist, passionate photographer, whatever you might call yourself, and do mostly photography for you in the streets, when you travel, maybe also shooting your friends and family when you gather, and if you have maybe some paid gigs, but that represents less than 10% of your time spent doing photography, go for the A7C II. Get yourself some small prime lenses that are often also more on the affordable side of things, maybe also a fairly compact zoom, and you will be golden. But if you're looking for a camera that you will use mostly for paid gigs and professional use, maybe you're already making a living out of photography or planning to get seriously into it, just go for the A7 IV. In the end, it is not like the A7 IV is twice as big and twice as heavy compared to the A7C II. It is just slightly bigger and heavier, but it comes with improved ergonomics and pro features like the double SD card slot that will be clutch when you're on critical shoots. And if it's your only camera, you can pick up a small lens like the 35mm Sony Zeiss or something similar. You can pop it on the A7 IV for your personal photo project or travels, and you will still get a very compact package, easy to carry around for hours around your neck or in a small space in your bag. But if you think that the A7 IV is the better solution for you, and if you can still wait another few months, maybe you should wait until the A7 V, which should be announced and released like early next year, I believe. But if you are convinced that you prefer the A7C2, go get it now, because the success of the A7C2 will only come about 2 years later the release of the A7 V. I mean, that's what happened with the A7 IV and A7C2, so it's just way too much waiting. Grab something as soon as you can, or just use what you have, go out and shoot. That's the most important. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.